And we're back. All right, didn't scare you off. Hopefully you gave me 5 stars on my first video. So this is part two. Hope you had a good intermission. Hopefully your setup is all correct. Your screen should pretty much look like mine. You're still in manufacture mode. But now it's time to tell Fusion how we're going to cut this. So if you look up top, you're going to see there's a whole bunch of new buttons. We're going to be focusing on 2D and 3D, not so much these other ones. We're going to stay away from those. So for our project, we're going to focus right now on 3D. So if you drop down the 3D window, you're going to find a button called Adaptive Clearing. And we're going to pick Adaptive Clearing. Okay? This little window appears, and I want you to get very familiar with this window because it's got 6 different tabs, and just about all of these operations that we're going to be using in this class are going to have very similar tabs, and they're all going to basically do the same thing. They're going to be very overwhelming at first, but take it slow. So this first tab is basically like me going into my shed and picking out which tool I'm going to use to maybe do my gardening. Maybe I'm digging a hole, maybe I'm cutting my lawn. For this project, we're going to be digging these holes. So I'm going to go into my shed, my toolbox, and I got to pick where it says select, which tool to grab. Well, last class we loaded a tool library. It was called ShopBot. So you should go to your local tool library, your shed, and grab the tool that you're supposed to be using for this project. And I gave you that in the constraints. 1/2 inch. Don't pick anything else but the 1/2 inch. Very important. Select it. I already put in the data for the tool to tell it how fast it's supposed to cut, how fast the spindle is supposed to spin, and there's a bunch of other data that we're going to learn about as we progress through the class. So you don't need to change any of this. The second tab where it says multi-axis. We don't have a multi-axis machine, so you'll never need to do anything here. So you can just skip that. We're going to go right to geometry. So think about it as I just went into my shed and I grabbed my tool. Now I need to tell myself, where am I going to do this work? Where am I going to dig my holes, or where am I going to, which yard am I going to cut? So this is showing Fusion, where would you like this toolpath to do its work? So you can see where it says machining boundary. Right now it says none. I'm going to change it to selection. And then I'm going to hover over my part, and I'm going to pick like a perimeter, like this one. The biggest perimeter would usually be the outside of the part. And I'm going to click it. And that's basically saying that Fusion should look at everything inside of that box I just clicked and try to cut it. It's almost like me saying, this is my fence to my yard. Try to cut the lawn inside this fence. Okay? So a lot of this data underneath here is telling it the details about how it should cut the grass, if you wanted to call this like a lawn. And we're going to, again, discuss more of the details within here and how it can affect the geometry. But the default for what we're doing should be okay for most of the parts that we're producing. So we're going to leave the geometry settings alone and really just picking that bounding box. Yeah, bounding box, we're going to leave that just alone. And then we're going to go right to heights. Okay. The heights, it's kind of nice in Fusion because we have a model. So the tool already knows how deep to go because it's going to sense all of these different Z heights of your model, and it's going to know not to cut any deeper than here and to go all the way to the bottom of this pocket in here and this pocket in here. So the tool already knows that it should try to cut out as much as it can reach. But there are certain circumstances where we'll want to maybe have that tool not go all the way to the bottom. and you can make those adjustments in here. So we're going to leave this at default also. The second to last tab, we do want to make a couple of changes. The first change is the maximum roughing step down. We're going to change that to 0.5, and that's basically saying how deep is that tool allowed to go as it's cutting. So if I had a shovel and I was digging a hole, I wouldn't want to push the shovel all the way into the bottom of the hole as I'm digging, because it might break my shovel. So I might want to dig a little bit at a time as I'm digging to the bottom of the deepest part of my hole. Same thing with a milling tool. They might break. So I got to be careful how deep I go as I'm slowly digging to the bottom of this, one pass at a time. So this is kind of a limitation of how strong my tool is, what kind of material I'm cutting. And this comes from some data, which we'll be learning about in class. Turn off stock to leave by clicking this little button right here. If I did not turn that off, then the tool would not cut all the way to the edge of the model. It would in fact leave 20 thousandths along the edge and then 20 thousandths on the bottom. And that would be like in the situation where I don't want the tool that I'm using to create a finished surface, and I want to come back with a different tool because maybe I want that surface to be really, really smooth. So yeah, this is something that for this project, we're not going to do tool changes, so we're just going to turn that off. Last is the linking. Linking is describing how the tool enters into the material and how it exits the material. If I'm going to cut this hole, do I just kind of dive the tool in, or do I zigzag it? If I kind of hover over this, you can see all of the different preview pictures of how the tool can enter in the material. It can zigzag, it can plunge, it can profile. Think of a swimmer or a diver diving into the pool. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can belly flop, you can do a nice clean dive, you can just jump in randomly. All of those are going to affect how you enter the pool and what kind of a splash you make. Same thing with milling. How we enter the material is going to impact the quality of the cut. It's going to impact the forces on the tool. So this is describing how is the tool going to enter. Helix is good for like metal, but wood is pretty soft. We can go ahead and we can plunge, so go ahead and change that to plunge, right into the wood because it's soft. I believe that probably should do it for us in this category. One other thing I want to change, we're going to go back to passes, because I did forget one other thing, optimal load. Optimal load, I'm going to hover over that. Make this change. We're going to change our optimal load to 0.3. Imagine you're cutting the grass or you're vacuuming. It's the amount or the distance that the tool will move over when it's cutting the next row. So if I'm using my lawnmower and I'm cutting the width of my lawnmower, when I move to the next row, how far or how much grass am I cutting? Am I cutting the full width of the lawnmower, or am I cutting a partial width of the lawnmower? So it's not always a good thing to be cutting 100% of the width of the tool. That's a lot of force on the tool. So in this case, I want to try to always have 0.3 inches of the tool cutting. And that reduces the forces on the tool. Okay? So I guess that was one I missed in the passes window, in addition to turning off stock to leave. All right? So remember, you can always go back to any of these windows if you forget something or something is not right. Just a quick recap. We picked a tool. We selected our geometry. We made no changes to our heights. In passes, we Changed our step down to 0.5, our optimal load to 0.3, turned off stock to leave, and we changed our ramp to a plunge. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to give it a second as this little blue circle starts to spin, and I'm going to zoom out, and you're going to see toolpaths. Look at that. And you'll notice that in the situations where you have a pocket that's deeper than 0.5, like this one's 0.5, so it went all the way down. This pocket over here is deeper than 0.5, so it had to do it in 2 passes. That's because I had a maximum step down of 0.5, so it had to do it in 2. All right, so there's your toolpath. If you make any mistake or if something doesn't look right, go over here, double click on adaptive, it'll open back up. You can go back in and you can try to rewind in this video or whatever you got to do to make the changes. Check my screen, check your screen, make sure it matches, and then hit OK again. If this ever shows an X or shows like a yellow color, you might have to right click and generate it, and it'll regenerate, hit yes, it'll regenerate the toolpath because it might be out of date. All right, one more video and it'll go through how to post the code for the machine and also how to simulate. Thank you again for watching.